Welcome in, Patrick Grimion, host of the Patty G Show. What's happening, man?
Good morning, Brian. Good morning. Good morning, man. I think your eyes were deceiving you. It's been 45 this whole morning.
It's been 45 the whole time.
The whole ride here, you said 48 downtown. And I'm like, I'm pretty much downtown already, and it's 45 degrees.
I need to stop looking up at the monitor and start looking at my phone because it's much bigger on my phone and just accept my aging.
Or just go see an ophthalmologist, get your eyes looked at.
So I did that, and they didn't up my prescription. So, I've got the glasses already.
Need a bigger dose, Brian.
I'd like to think so. Anyway. We got a couple topics to talk about today, and there's 3 different headlines all converging at once, and those are just the ones that you and I were looking at yesterday. And they're all about tipping in restaurants, and I think it's going to open up a different conversation.
Well, I think it's about just tipping in general. And tipping outside of a restaurant. When is it appropriate? And
has tipping gotten out of control is one headline from CBS 8. How tipflation and tip creep are sparking a backlash, causing a lot of people saying, I don't feel obligated to tip. And then there's another headline that if you take those two and kind of extract logical conclusions or ask logical questions, how restaurants are getting creative to attract workers. Let's back this up for just a second. Where we're at right now in Louisiana, there are 3 jobs available for every one. No, is it? There's 1.5 jobs available for every one person looking for a job. I think I have that number right.
I thought it was 3.
Was it 3?
Right. Okay, 30,000 open jobs, 10,000 people looking.
You're right. I was trying to remember back for all the way back to Monday.
Today's Thursday?
3 jobs available for every one person looking for a job.
Right.
Which means a lot of jobs, 2 to be specific, per person, are going to go left open. Okay. If you're looking for a job and the restaurant field is still hurting right now, has been since the beginning of the pandemic, if you're looking for a job, why would you go towards a job where, number one, you got some people over tipping, number 2, some people over tipping and a whole lot more people saying, I don't feel obligated to tip anymore. Your wage is not based off of your work. Your wage is based off of your gratuities.
Yeah, it's based off the service you provide to the patrons in the establishment.
Not just your service. You can put out the best level of service out there, but if you're dealing with a person who's just an awful person, so basically your wage is an hourly or a nightly, if not hourly, lottery.
Yeah.
On a small scale,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
You don't know if you are serving in a restaurant, you don't know from table to table whether or not you're going to earn money right there. You know you're going to put forth the effort, but you don't know. You can't know until you get that check back and there's some cash in the little foldy thing, or there's the gratuity written in on the tip line on the receipt for the credit card.
Yeah.
Regardless of your effort, it's still up in the air as to whether or not you actually earn. So if I'm looking for a job, even if I wanted to hold down a part-time job while looking for another job, what would encourage me to go into the restaurant world, into the server world?
I think that element of the lottery still is attractive for some. The point where I could make a few $100s tonight just by working some tables, or I'll end up making $20. That plus side for some is still there, and the hours are better for them depending on their lifestyle. If they want to do things during the day and then work at night, it's more conducive to that if you're working
as the backup gig.
Right, as the backup
You're
gig.
seeking a full-time job, or you even have a full-time job during the day, and then,
right.
Well, I want to earn a little extra coin, so I'm going to go in at night. The story from Money Watch. Tipping is encountering its own form of inflation, with consumers commonly facing digital kiosks that ask for tips that start at 18 to 20% and can go as high as 30%, a far cry from the 15% that used to be traditional. I'm seeing this in a world where someone who makes, well, I don't want to call like one place out, but someone who turns around,
Place X.
Yeah, someone who turns around and grabs a bottle off the shelf and puts it on the counter in front of you is asked for the same gratuity as someone who's refilling your drink and removing your plates all night.
Right. I mean, it's gone so far as you've now got skits coming across on social media of people making fun of how bad the tip inflation or how bad tipping is, where you go to your grandma and she gives you leftovers and she gives you an iPad saying, all right, 15, 20%. Come on now, little Jimmy.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's exactly. I know that's the stretch. That's
right.
overreach end, but is that kind of where we are? And if that's where we are, I'm going to go right back to it. Why would I serve at a restaurant at a table? I could stand behind a counter, do little to nothing to go out of my way, and, oh, by the way, already earn minimum wage or more, whereas in a restaurant I'm not going to. My baseline salary is going to be higher, and there's still that little tip line.
Yeah, and I think looking at changing that model is an interesting perspective to take in. So if you look at how they're paying them, was it half minimum wage, $2-3 an hour, because they're assuming they're going to get tipped up
Which
to that point.
Actually less than half, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
And but then they always tell you we're going to pay you up to minimum wage if you don't get enough tips. So you get that benefit, right? That you're going to at least make minimum wage serving tables. But if you're at a dinner table, Brian, and you are eating dinner with your family, and instead of seeing what used to be a $15, $16 entree is now price hiked 25%, are you still going to order that knowing you may not you don't have to tip anymore? So if you change the pricing on the front end to allow your staff to get paid at a regular base rate or even more, would you pay more for dinner knowing that you don't have to tip? Or is the cost of dinner fixated in your mind that I'm not willing to pay more than $12 for a hamburger? If they bump it up to 16, I'm just not going anymore.
So in margins in restaurants are already not the best. I mean, they're razor thin in most places, especially in the wake of the pandemic. Like with their costs have gone up, and they haven't been able to raise prices to keep up with the cost of food that's going to hell. The cost of an egg is ridiculous. Beef, by the way, beef's about to jump this year as well. So
are we as patrons more comfortable knowing that we can just sign a tip at the end than pay for a higher priced meal?
Would we have to walk through the process of just getting comfortable with the math?
Right.
Everywhere else in the world, I shouldn't say everywhere else in the world, but a lot of other places around the world, restaurant workers, servers, waiters, however you want to refer to them, are paid their wage and the tipping's not required.
Yeah, it's almost for people coming in from different countries here when they see a tip line on there, they ask what is that?
Right.
Is their payroll not baked into the cost of the meal?
We're going to get into some of the other but some of the other areas where tipping is now getting to be more and more custom and the fatigue that it's causing. But I don't want to close the book yet on the whole lottery mentality of this, though. It baffles me. Like the idea that I could put forth my best effort for hour and a half, however long that family's at that table. And at the end of the night, when I hand over the bill and says, how was everything? They're telling me fine all night long. And then at the end of the night, when I hand over that bill and say, how was everything? All of a sudden there's a problem. And more we're seeing zeros in the tip line. And they're showing up on social media when it happens too.
Yeah.
The lottery, the possibility, just it scares me away rather than attracts me to it, thinking how I could oppress somebody and get more money out of it, as opposed to I could work my butt off and get stiffed.
And it's also built in this mentality of people analyzing who's sitting at the table before they place an order. Are they ordering alcohol or no alcohol? That's going to determine maybe how much service I give them, because if you have a higher alcohol bill, now you get a higher tab. Now you're hopefully going to get a higher 20%.
All right, we're going to break here in just a second. When we come back, let's talk about some of the areas where you're starting to see a gratuity line show up on your receipt, some of the ways that restaurants are looking at changing this, and also I want to talk about workplace fatigue. The healthcare industry has received a lot of attention because of it, but what about other fields? We'll talk about that next on Talk 173. The Money Watch story talks about, according to Cornell University, tips were traditionally given to workers who earned the so-called tipped minimum wage, federally set at $2.13 an hour. $2.13 an hour. And thus rely on tips to earn the balance of their income. Most commonly, these tipped workers are wait staff at restaurants and bartenders. So is there room for resetting the whole tip craze, paying minimum wage to work at a restaurant, and if I bump you $5, I'm bumping you $5. Forget about 20%. But it's just a little grease to say you did a good job. Yeah. You shouldn't be. I don't know how to say it. Like I had it in my mind right last night.
Well, I mean, so think about it. If a restaurant, you'd have to reset the entire mentality, because if a restaurant does a 20% price bump, now you've got some people saying, "Well, I'm not going to pay that much for that meal," but they're just looking at that single item on the menu. They're not looking at the whole meal as a whole. Meaning, if you get a bill for $50 and then you tip it, 20%, and now you're up to $60. But if you get a bill for $60, are you inclined that for the same meal? Are you now inclined to be like, "Oh, that's too much. I'm paying for this meal"? And then you look at the to-go orders that some restaurants have forced in an 18% gratuity on.
So, and to
But
me,
it's now a service charge,
right, which is crap.
which is what
Because when I'm-
it created because of the pandemic.
Yes, and I get the reason they did it on a short term, but there's no reason to prolong that once you're back to 100% capacity in the restaurant.
There's a restaurant I still frequent, and they still charge 18% service fee for to-go orders.
Who is it? Not on there. Who is it? No, it's not.
My thing
There's
about
better on the
this
same
is
block.
I can see both sides of the argument.
They're
Oh, same.
Like, why should I be obliged to tip you? You know what I mean? Like, I get it, but the entitlement is
When-
like you should tip me 20% every single time that you come in here.
so, and I've
But
gone
what if, the
to,
service isn't good?
But that's if the service isn't good.
Yeah.
but you're still
And you should
obliged
note
to-
that at the time. And you
Yeah.
should note that from the first time they ask, "Hey, is everything going good over here?" No, it's not.
Yeah.
But wait until you get the check and then writing out a 0 or anything under that 20%. If you wait until after the fact, they can't remedy the situation. They can't serve you.
Yeah.
Because and that's the problem is too many people are just running out the clock and then stiffing them.
So, and that also can translate into the business world. I'm listening to Great Worker right now. It's from the people who made Good to Great, and they talk about the failure that annual performance reviews do in the workplace. So you fail all year long. You don't hear about it but once a year.
Yeah.
Imagine if like Tiger Woods or Serena Williams got coached once a year.
Right.
Oh, turn your serve just a little bit to the 2 degrees to the right.
Yeah.
We'll talk next year and we'll see how you're doing.
Yeah.
Like that same thing for the table. You wait till the very end when everything's done. They can't fix what's going on right now.
Right.
Until you sit there and Karen them and say, "Oh, it was just poor service. I need a free dessert."
Yeah. And
I've
then
worked for tips before, and it pisses me off when people tip you little. Like they don't have to tip me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
when you were working for tips, you were making $2 an hour?
I wasn't making any extra money an hour. I was just working
Straight
off of
tips, no wage.
Mm-mm.
That's crazy.
I mean, we made really good money
Where was this at?
at the bar. My
Oh, so your family? Okay, but it was a family place. You didn't go out to Outback Steakhouse. And,
Oh no.
yeah.
I mean, I was still working for tips.
No, I understand.
Well, were you
but-
working for tips and were you reporting those tips? That's a whole
Like,
nother
my
side of the
taxes?
equation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're an honest person.
I can't be
About 90% of the
I can't be it gives me
Folks
anxiety.
choose to
Like,
not
I think
report
that
cash.
The IRS is gonna come get me. The IRS scares me. Doing my taxes, I always feel like I'm gonna do something wrong unintentionally, and I'm gonna get arrested for it. It scares me.
tell you what, you having that mentality is it's sad that people have to have a scared mentality, but having that, you'll always do the right thing.
Oh yeah.
Because I
just want
see
them to,
see
come
people
seize
every
all my
day.
shit.
I see people every day who are doing sketchy stuff, and who their past preparers were doing sketchy stuff. To where now I'll tell people when they come in, I say, look, I'm not the cheapest in town, I'm not the most aggressive in town,
Yeah.
but I promise you, you'll stay out of prison.
Yeah.
Like that's my promise. Because not everybody else is making that promise. They're saying, I'll get you your maximum.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, your maximum could be a maximum sentence too.
I get scared. I don't want to go to prison. I really don't think I would fare well in prison.
I don't like stripes. Stripes just don't.
Do they still
Okay.
use stripes?
No idea.
How many people should be asked to work without a wage, though?
Oh, think that people should
Worked
be working
without
for
a
$2
wage?
an
She worked without a wage. Everything she earned was gratuity.
Yeah.
How many people should be asked to work without a wage? Do you think today, this was before the pandemic, I'm assuming, right?
It was like during the pandemic.
Where and was back home,
Yeah.
working for family.
Yeah.
652 Talk 107.3 FM WBRP. 45 degrees in downtown Baton Rouge. I didn't even look up. I didn't check. Mornings with Brian Haldane rolling right along. Patrick Grimion in with us. All right, where are you seeing it? Where are you seeing the gratuity on the receipt that you don't feel you should have to pay, or it's on the little flip pad that you don't feel you should have to pay because they didn't do anything, but it's this increase, this tip crease, this tipflation, this tip peer pressure. Where are you seeing it? Let us know on our Facebook Live feed. We're going on Facebook Live as we do every single morning from 6 till 9 a.m. Patrick, where is it surprising you?
It's surprising me on takeout, to go, and also at at certain establishments where you're not quote unquote brought or served your meal. You go to the register, you place your order, they cook it, and then they call your name and you go pick it up.
Right.
But then there's a tip line there because they got to pour your drink into
At
the
that
cup.
point, they've done the exact same thing that McDonald's has.
Right.
And you don't tip at McDonald's.
And then it's like the kitchen's done most of the work.
Right.
Because they cooked it all. All you did was bring it out onto the side and call my name.
Right. Now, we all kind of had this understanding, this tacit understanding that during the pandemic, when people weren't allowed to sit down in restaurants,
Yeah.
we'll boost you right there. Okay, no problem. We can, throw an extra 5 spot on for whatever. That's cool. But now that restaurants are open again, you can't continue that same level of charge for lack of service. And I don't mean poor service. I mean the inability to serve.
Well, and I'm curious, too, on how that gets dispersed. Whenever I place a to-go order and it's not assigned to a specific server, and more so, the manager brings it out to me.
Right.
If the manager brings me my to-go
Who's
order,
not working for $2.13
who's
an
making
hour.
a good salary, hopefully,
Right.
what happens with that now being labeled service charge?
Right.
And how long are we going to continue to see a service charge on the ticket? And who get my if you're able to show me how it gets dispersed, and maybe it goes to the kitchen that's dedicated just to go orders because you got a crazy business, maybe that's okay for an increased price so long as it's getting to those people. But if you're just then recirculating it to everybody in the restaurant that's already busting their butt at the tables, if you're packed and there's a 2-hour wait, I'm at least going to get food. But because that server's missing out on it, you're saying, oh, no, because you didn't sit down, we're still going to charge you 20%, 18%.
No, yeah, it's at that point, it's the price of the food at that point.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it that way, just make that your prices.
Just make it more expensive to order to go,
Right.
but change the pricing of the food, I think would read better
And then
than seeing a service charge line item on the ticket.
the other part of this is
With still the option to add more.
the other part of this is the assumption on the front end. You walk into
Yes.
a place and, like, let's say it's a quicker service establishment where you pay up front and then go stand outside and collect your food in a minute. You're paying for that gratuity before they've even done anything.
Yeah.
That's the ones that astound me. Bayou Gal says on Twitter, I tip my server based on service. I also tip for curbside service of the meal that's brought to my car. Okay, so that right there is a good one because you are going a little bit above and beyond. If I got to get out of my car, walk in and go get it, I've done half the work.
Oh, yeah. And it's different if I sat in my car and I called and said, hey, I'm here to come pick up my food, and they walk it out to me. That may warrant, but again, like you said, maybe that warrants a 5 spot, not 18% on the total meal.
Right.
And 100% on the front end, that's something that gets me prior to when before I started ordering alcohol at dinners before I was of age, right? I would go out. I had a dinner with my girlfriend at the time and another couple, and we were going to have a good night at a nicer restaurant, nicer establishment. And we sat down, and the server comes up, and she says, all right, would y'all like to take a drink order? And we're like, no, we're just going to have waters, and we're fine. And then walked away, said, okay, that's fine. And she just walked away. Table next to me comes back, sits down. They place their drink order, and she goes, okay, also, here are the specials for the evening. And she rambled off the specials to them, but didn't tell us the specials. And I was like, I would have loved to order 2 of those specials and would have tipped you on everything that I would have paid for. but you didn't do that because I didn't order alcohol. And so you immediately said, it's not going to be a high paying ticket. I'm not going to serve you to the fullest I can.
So let's get back to the revamping of how restaurants are getting creative about paying their workers. And they're doing a number of things that are really outside the box. This is from, where was this one from? Was this the one from Nuts? I'll give attribute. Oh, News Nation. Help wanted signs are now ubiquitous at many of America's restaurants, and the pandemic and great resignation made worker shortages even more common. Quote, given the onset of remote work that COVID brought on, a lot of people have more options for jobs, says Vivian Wang, founder and CEO of Landed, a firm that helps hundreds of restaurants hire workers. Annual turnover rates in the restaurant industry were always high, sitting around 130% prior to the pandemic. 130% prior to the pandemic. Now, she estimates it's closer to 200%. So a few of the things restaurants are doing in order to stave that off, they're increasing wages. That's a good thing.
That's good.
Here's one. Crowdfunding to pay for health benefits. Interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it's having high turnover makes your health insurance almost impossible to maintain because you have to keep cycling people in and out, in and out, in and out. And it's almost impossible to offer benefits like that.
It is. It is. When you have that kind of turnover, you can't get set up in time.
So I wonder if on the crowdfunding, if you can maybe even make like a restaurant association insurance plan for all restaurants pay into an annual fee, and it provides health insurance to their workers.
And then when you leave Applebee's to go to TGI Fridays,
you're still on the same. Yeah, you're still on the same plan. So then it's the national health insurance as opposed to a location by location.
Interesting concept, but who's paying into that? Because you'd be paying based off the contribution would be based off the wage, not off the tips, right? Ooh. I know. Which is why it's darn near impossible to get.
Or would you just make it per person? If you're a staff of 50 people, you pay X per employee.
It's possible, but if I'm paying that employee $2.13 an hour and telling them you go work for tips, how do we cover that? You don't. They're also adjusting work weeks, and this was another interesting one. Supporting affordable housing. Way too much to get into. I tell you what, we'll continue that part over on the Facebook Live feed. We did not even get to the burnout part of this. We will at a later time. In the meanwhile, we got 30 seconds left. Who's on the show this week?
This week we have EK with the Covery and Regimen Fitness.
Oh, sweet. Have you been to the Covery yet?
I have not. We're going to do it.
Do the freezing thing.
Yeah. We're going to do a day event there with our team, and so I'm excited to check it out.
He's Patrick Gramion, host of the Patty G Show. Stick around for a couple minutes during Facebook during the top of the hour news. Here comes ABC News at 7 o'clock. Staying at 7 o'clock. The ID says it's 7 o'clock.
Hey, it's 7 o'clock.
Yeah, no shit.
Affordable house. Just pay the people more.
Okay, but
just double their wage.
Okay, but like for Alondra, that's zero.
Then pay them something.
I would be curious to see what your take would be if you would do that here in Baton Rouge.
I wouldn't do that here.
Exactly.
Like
you wouldn't do that anywhere that wasn't in the family.
No,
right.
Yeah.
That it's not an example of how to run things.
Yeah, I'm saying it is.
Okay.
We made really good money. Make really good money.
Yeah.
Like, tips were enough for us to not have to have a wage.
Absolutely, but you were in a unique situation, to say the least.
And family working in family businesses is always going to be an anomaly. It's always going to be different than the norm because family treats family different.
Yeah, I mean, we're the whole family there.
But
everybody worked without a pay?
They all worked without pay?
Yeah.
Or was it just family members?
No, nobody has a wage there. Like
that's crazy. How is that allowed?
Because they require you to claim your tips. So by claiming the tips, they're able to show they earned this much by working. So they're able to get past the free labor. It's not free labor. They're just paying them differently. The pay models do. The pay structures do. But if they didn't claim tips, they'd be shut down because they can't prove that their workers are making anything.
Right.
So that's why they're making their employees claim tips, saying, no, you have to show how much you made that night.
Feels like it's begging for an audit constantly.
For sure.
Because you can claim tips, but are you claiming 100% of them? Like,
well, and then you've got people that are. that's another thing. Why are you not tipping food truck workers?
That's a good question because the food trucks here in Baton Rouge, I tip all the time, and they have the line on the receipt, and I'm like, you're standing in a truck all night long. You're doing your bit.
But it's a rough. In a food truck, you got to be the chef and the server and the cashier.
It is.
It's brutal work.
Right. But here's the thing. Okay, like I love the big squeezy. All right, love getting my juice. Okay, I'll go to the big squeezy and I'll be like, I need skinny greens and a crazy 8. And the guy will open the fridge behind him, grab a skinny greens and a crazy 8, and put them on the counter. And then he'll flip the little iPad over and it'll say, do you want to pay 18%, 20%, or custom on the tip?
They don't even give you 15% option?
There might be a 15 on there as well. I know I wanted to do 3 and I wanted to leave room for custom because custom is one of the options. But I'll hit custom and I'll put $2. That's $1 a bottle. Okay. Off of what's already decently priced juice, right? $1 a bottle, which is about what I'd tip off a pint of beer if I was going to a bar, right? So now let's say I'm not a smoker, but let's say I was a smoker and I go into a Be Quick and I'm like, pack of Marlboro Lights, please. He turns around, grabs a pack of Marlboro Lights and put them on the counter. He's done the exact same action as the guy at Big Squeezy, but there's no tip line at Be Quick. Exact same work, exact same action, and exact same level of service.
And I'm curious to know how the Big Squeezy's pay structure is. Are they already paying them $8-9 an hour, and then they just like, let's add tips to it?
Yeah, I don't know.
And then as the tips go into that cashier, because it's a cashier at that point. It's not a
but they make smoothies and whatnot. And I think they have bowls, like protein bowls or whatever.
Okay, so you're just not using.
I'm not utilizing their service, but I'm tip. Time to get a look at that forecast, and yes, there will be more rain. Here's WBRZ meteorologist Marissa Nuzzo.
So they're performing a service, right?
Right.
So it's a service industry.
Yes.
Maybe if I explained the tips, you would get it. Like the way that we would like split them up and also take them and stuff like that is like you kind of had to report the tips because first of all, like the credit card tips, you like that's on a receipt. You have to report that, and then also like we get paid out at the end of the night with like cash from the till, like out of the cash tips and stuff like that, or the credit card tips.
Well, I figured that part.
Pay us like in cash from like the cash that they have from the bank and stuff like that. So you have to report that. Like,
well, you're supposed to, but not. There's some places that they still have the same setup and they don't report it. So, if it's a service industry thing that you got a tip, should I add a tip line in my tax return bill?
You should.
Let's see.
Let it, bro.
Take me for